So let me find out the broadcast. YouTube Studio. So I think we are live. Analytics, create live. There we go. And here, let me share the live stream with the rest of the folks. There we are. And cool. So we are live, and yeah, let's start. So what we are looking at here is an update to the first scene of the Plague Puppet pilot. Jed and John and Josh have been working on this scene. We have building blocks put in so far. We're gonna have Jed and John take us through the work so far here. We created the main cameras, right, Jed? So so yeah, let's start looking at maybe we can play it and then we can start decomposing it.
Yeah, let's if we could share John's screen real quick.
Yes.
Let's
oh, cool.
He's sharing it. I know. So Jed is on a phone. Unfortunately, in Portland, they are under some pretty heavy winter conditions, and he has no service except his phone. So
yeah, so apologize everybody for not showing my face, but welcome in. Glad you could join us. Yeah, we've been working on the intro scene here for the Plague Puppets pilot, and we'll show you in some later episodes sort of how we got to where we are now. But it started with some thumbnail sketches that I worked on just in my head to sort of beat out what this opening scene is. And I was able to rough in some sketches, put together an animatic in Photoshop that then John and I have been working on in 3D and Unreal Engine to start, basically putting out the building blocks of the set design. So working in 3D, I approach it similar to the way that I work in stop motion, which is we need to set up a tabletop. We need to get in some of the tentpole set design pieces and objects and characters. So we can just start working on the blocking and have a good understanding for the world that we're building and what we need to shoot and what we're going to see. So as you're joining us right now, we're in that middle phase of what's typically called a previs, 3D previs. So we can work on the blocking and timing of each shot. We can select cameras and lenses so we know what we're seeing and be able to build out the scene shot by shot. So yeah, John, if you just want to kind of do a little flyby of the overhead here.
Yes. So what we see.
So here's our neighborhood.
Right.
So we're introducing everybody to the world of the Plague Puppets, the neighborhood they live in, where Ma Peeves Orphanarium resides. And, Ma Peeves Orphanarium is going to be a, grand Victorian older home that probably has a lot of history to it that we'll get to throughout the lore. of the project. But Ma Peebs is now in charge. She's raising the puppets and getting them ready for adoption. So we just put in a little placeholder for right now. Across the street, you can see some neighborhood houses that we put in that are just, cut and paste Victorian houses for now, but we'll model and build those out. And so we're really just trying to figure out the dimensions here of the space. And there's a couple key shots that we'll get to within the animatic that gives us information to understand the placing of the objects and how we want to shoot this. So this is just a previs to lay out, lay of the land to get a good beat on everything before we start importing models and doing animation. This will help inform us in the animatic phase for the production challenges that we have and the assets that we'll need, and then eventually the VFX camera and lighting. So this is the very first start of the process.
Nice, nice. And so, yeah, here to the left we see the orphanarium, right? And we see the main character. She's in front of the orphanarium. She's looking to be adopted. Um, and she this adventure is gonna be like a night rain scene, right? That's the goal.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, so, this is, evening time right before the sun sets. If you could imagine sort of setting up a lemonade stand as a little kid, hoping that people driving by will give you 5 cents for lemonade, or maybe you're stranded on the street and hoping for somebody to rescue you. This is sort of a moment here where we want to really get the audience engaged in Enid and her personality and her leap of faith eventually to run out into the road to get some attention. So we want to build up this moment so that we care about the character. We understand her sensibilities. There's some dialogue that'll be in here as well to help tell the story. And, if you think about, when you're a kid, your parents always tell you, don't cross the street, or, come home when the lamps go on.
Mm-hmm.
There's all those fun tropes that we're used to as kids. And
Yeah.
as these puppets are raised by Ma Peebs in the orphanarium, a lot of them, they sneak out at night and they go on some adventures. But, for the most part, Enid, our hero character here in the pilot, she hasn't really explored much outside the orphanarium, and it's a dangerous world out there and an exciting world. And she wants to be adventurous. She wants to get adopted, wants to see the world and get out beyond her means. So this is a good opportunity for us to see her take on those challenges, a leap of faith again, and getting some attention, trying to get passerbys to notice her.
Nice, nice. And we have cars that are right now they're just you know placeholders with headlights.
Yep.
That's cool.
Yeah, and so when we go into a previs like this, before we start bogging down all the information of models and cars and trees and things like that, it's a really good opportunity for us to block everything out with simple blocks, no pun intended, but
Yeah.
that's what those cars are. So the yellow and the blue, those are cars that are going to be passing by, and we can just use these as geometrical objects now to show a previs. For then, we'll replace those with models. We'll continue to upgrade textures. Even the grass right now is just a placeholder. The HDRI, which is our background sky. So you can see a little bit of a sunset and some stars and some trees.
Yeah.
This is just a placeholder for now, so we can understand the depth, of the world that we're building, so that then we can create a good list of assets that we need to continue and upgrade and replace these as we move forward.
Cool. Cool.
Yeah, and so we got, one thing that we did, which is interesting. puppets are only 6 or 8 inches tall. So that's something that I'm used to in stop motion, working with miniatures. You're working on a different scale. That's not it's a human scale, but the scale within the puppet verse
Yeah.
is a little bit smaller. So one of the things that we had to do was to have a human-sized pillar that we would use as a 6-foot object. And then we know that the puppet is about, 8 inches or so. So scale was not a challenge, but just something that we had to investigate to say, well, how tall are the street lamps? How big are the houses? How wide is the sidewalk compared to a human?
Yeah.
And so once we had this human figure that you can see, this little pillar at 6 feet, that would give us the scale for the lamppost, the sidewalk, the drain,
Yeah.
etc.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it looks it's a little bit of the trick of the eye there, because you would look at some things and think, well, that doesn't look right, but you have to realize that the puppet's the size of a cat.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
No, it's a good idea. It's funny. It's because to me the cars seemed a little bit small. Try you put the pillar next to the car.
Yeah.
yeah, I think we had one like driving and one
Yeah.
passenger, right?
Yeah,
It might be a little small.
yeah. I guess the
Maybe.
roof is a little small, but yeah,
Yeah.
overall.
Maybe. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like chin height.
Uh huh.
Yeah, chin height or eye height, depending on the type of vehicle. I think
Mm-hmm.
one thing that we're going to explore here is the design sensibilities of the puppet verse. And we certainly, this is taking time in, 2024. This is current day.
Yeah.
So it's not a historical piece.
Yeah.
But when it comes to things like cars and lampposts and certain things like that, we may lean, more towards the 30s, 40s, 50s
Yeah.
era from a design sensibility standpoint. And so based on the shape of those cars and those things, we'll find the right models to plug in. But for now, we're just using sort of like a Tron style, building block just to get the timing down more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
For the speed of the cars, I feel like when I look at this neighborhood, because of the size of the orphanarium and the history behind the orphanarium on that side of the road, which is our west side of the road, as we talked about,
Mm-hmm.
the east side of the road with the 3 homes, those are a little bit more, simple Victorian homes, but the other side of the street has a little bit bigger mansions. Maybe it's backed up to a lake or an ocean or a park or something like that. So I think the orphanarium, a little bit bigger and broader, set back across the road or off the road a little bit more than the houses across the street that are a little bit more neighborhood-like.
Yeah. It's starting to look like Seattle.
That's what we're getting at.
Yes. Um, coincidentally. Um, yeah, because I guess we don't really have an actual location right in mind. This is, every American town that has some mansions.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because obviously with both Julie and I being in the Northwest and the puppets and Ma Peeps Orphanarium, I think the idea is that it's somewhere in the Pacific Northwest. But
Yeah.
having said that, I do think it relates to a lot of towns and cities. And being from Chicago, as I am, if you're on the North Shore going down Lakeshore Drive or Sheridan Road, you've got the Home Alone houses and the Ferris Bueller houses, and you have those types of neighborhoods. But then on the other side of the street, if you're on Lake Michigan, you have the big giant plots of the older mansions.
Nice.
And so I sort of used that as inspiration to tie together Julie's sensibilities of the Northwest and me living in Portland now, understand a little bit how these neighborhoods are built out. But then I'm also relating a little bit back to the Midwest and Chicago and bringing in some of that inspiration.
Nice, nice. Cool. So what do we want to? What do we? Shall we look at some of these? You know, maybe look at some of the cameras, look at some of the shot.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, this is the what we have so far.
So this is the first shot.
So intro shot and.
Oh, hold on, hold on. Let's do one shot at a time, John.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so here's the idea behind this intro shot, and we may have a little preamble in the pilot ultimately that explains a little bit more about Julie as an artist and gives some actual true history to how the Plague Puppets came to be in real life over the last couple of years. But after that preamble or that intro, our first introduction to the puppet world, puppet verse, as we say, would be seeing this small, strange character that we don't know who it is.
Yeah.
And under a street lamp, isolated, car driving by. And John, you can just go back to that first shot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so we just want to slow push in here to build a little bit of tension. We're introducing the character. We see the scale of the character compared to the lamppost. I think that's really important to understand how small and mighty, you know, these characters are, right? So this introduction here gives a little bit of, not so much isolation or loneliness, but a sense of being small to the world. And this is the first time that she's really gone outside the orphanarium and approaches the precipice of the sidewalk. And so I think this is just a nice introduction to the neighborhood. We understand there's some traffic, and we see the small little character out there that'll be overlit by the lamppost, and wonder, you know, what the heck is that pacing back and forth?
I love the slow, it's not a zoom, it's a dolly, right? Or is
It's
it
just a slow dolly move down the sidewalk.
I like that as an opening. It's so cool. Like it's gonna be raining, car goes by. So cool with the dolly move towards the puppet.
Yeah, it brings the viewer into the world when you do that slow push in, for an introductory shot. And again, we see the scale. We understand that there's some traffic, you know, one car speeding by, and that there's a sense of loneliness here, right?
Yeah.
That it's raining, you're isolated, you're on your own, there's a car screaming by, and you're just trying to get some attention, and yet we haven't revealed the puppet. So
yeah,
that's part of revealing Enid and her character. If we go to the next shot,
this is very. I like that. It's very Spielberg. It's very Spielberg. I like that that intro.
Yeah, it just gives like a sense of coming into the world and brings the viewer along. And then this is very generic right now for everybody watching, but in a sense, what we want to do here is Enid is running back and forth frantically, back and forth on the sidewalk, and she's trying to get attention of these cars driving by. So one car drives by to the right, another car drives to the left, and she has a sign. We don't have the sign in there now that we'll get to down the road, but essentially she's looking, you know, to be adopted and trying to get the attention of the neighbors coming by. And it'll just give a hint of who this puppet is a little bit more. And what we want to do is reveal her slowly but surely, shot by shot.
Yep.
So this will give a good action moment where she just speeds by one way, then she speeds by the other way. And then when we come to the next shot, shot 3, which is then Enid standing in front of the orphanarium, and we may reverse the shot. There's some things we're going to do with this, but essentially what we want to do here is reveal the puppet in a PFP format. For those of you following along that are familiar with the NFTs, our profile pics, we want to make sure that we nail that classic silhouette of the puppet and finally reveal who Enid is and see her in all her glory. And in the meantime, we're also showing off now the orphanarium as the main structure and home from where she came. So this will be a nice reveal moment. And we'll have some dialogue here eventually.
Yep.
We have a few lines we're working on. And then from here, once we've introduced the character, the environment, we have a little bit of the story. This is now where the action really takes place and the story springboards from here. And what we would like to do is have a leap of faith where Enid hasn't been outside the orphanarium. She hasn't crossed the street. She hasn't taken any chances. She's a little bit shy, and is looking for an opportunity to take a chance and say, you know what? I got to go do this myself. I got to jump out there and make myself available and open up myself to the world and get some attention. So we have a little leap of faith here again. There's a bit of a trap there with the storm drain in the road. It's a challenge, something that she has to overcome. It's a hoop she has to jump through, a hurdle she has to jump over, whatever parlance you want to use there. But that's the idea, that she takes that leap of faith and says, I'm going to go for it.
And I remember that here, we're gonna have, there's gonna be water gushing down the drain here, and so this one is really gonna look like, it's a big jump. Imagine a kid, jumping over a hole, right? That's the gist.
Yeah, it's like an element of danger, and it's also an obstacle to overcome. And what we want to do throughout the entire pilot, not to get too deep into it, but is to see Enid overcome her fears and feel confident in herself, which at the end will end up with a happy ending that TBD on what we'll give away for that. But as we see Enid go through these different challenges and overcome them, we see her gaining confidence. And then sometimes her confidence might get knocked down or some things might not work, but she took that chance. And I think that's the storytelling device that we want to use for this character, to see her grow into, her, what is her current self at the end of the pilot.
Cool.
And so this shot here, and it's a little bit of out of context for those of you watching, but to explain what this shot is, what we would like to do during this intro scene of Enid is to introduce characters inside the orphanarium. So Preston and Franklin, who are the...
So sorry to interrupt. I was wondering what this was. So we are inside the orphanarium, looking outside the window, and there are two puppets looking at her.
Correct. Yeah. So we haven't comped this in yet. So again, it might be a little confusing for anybody following along. But essentially what this is a point of view, POV, as we call it. It's a POV shot over the shoulder, OTS, over the shoulder shot of Preston and Franklin, who are the hosts of the podcast. And if you haven't followed along to Julie's podcast and the Pike Poppets podcast, I would urge you guys to go listen to that, because I think it gives a lot of personality and introduction to these characters. But Preston and Franklin are sort of our hosts and sort of on the side of the audience, right? So they're the ones looking in and observing Enid and giving commentary to the audience to fill them in on kind of what's going on and be the audience point of view. So this shot from overhead, from let's say the third story window inside the rumpus room, as Preston and Franklin are looking out the window at Enid, we see her running across the street, and there's some good, funny dialogue there about her getting run over and, oh, is she really running out into the street? That kind of thing. So we're now introducing the interior elements of the orphanarium and having a point of view from Preston and Franklin observing this and sort of doing a narrative for the audience to understand what they're looking at.
Nice.
And so we see this fun little puppet. And one thing that we really like doing here, which is fun to do with animation, especially with miniatures, and by miniatures I mean that the puppet is so small, is that when we're looking at action shots of the puppet in real time close up, they're very fast. There's a lot of action. There's a lot of energy. But then if you come up to a bird's eye view or a puppet eye view, you just realize the puppet's actually just running across the street like a cat. It's really like, like has a slower gait to it. And I think there's like some comedy there on pulling out from being so intimate and having a bird's eye view and seeing what the reality is of the situation and seeing Preston and Franklin's point of view.
Nice. Nice.
And so now we get like, oh yeah, she's running out into that road. What's going to happen, right? And here's what's going to happen.
I like the shot. Nice.
So as Enid runs out to the center and we cut to this horizon line shot in the road, what we want to do here is she runs out, does a spin, raises her sign, has another line of dialogue. Again, we have a few lines that we're testing in the animatic and the radio play for the voiceover. For the scene, maybe a little bit longer. We may have a punch in. But the idea here is that, she's made it to the center of the road. She feels like she's safe. She's raising her sign and flagging down, the next car and saying like, hey, look at me. Here I am. Can you see me? Can you hear me? Generically speaking. And then the hope of that one of these cars is going to stop, pick her up, talk to her, whatever it may be. She now is like, I'm here. Oh, here comes the car. But then these cars just speed by, splash some water on her. Maybe there's some dialogue of somebody, get out of the road, you silly puppets, or, whatever it is. I think it's fun that the neighbors kind of know who these puppets are because they run amok throughout the neighborhood sometimes. And so they're a little bit of a hazard, and something fun there where they're like a pest, like where you're just like, what are you doing in the middle of the road? And maybe we have a car swerve, or, we'll have some honks, or they flash their brights. Something fun like that. Then Enid gets spun around, in this close-up shot, soaking wet, gets splashed, cars spin by. She does a little tornado spin. And then at the end of this shot here, she just is a little bit defeated. Like, she took her chance. She had a leap of faith. She went for it. She broke all the rules that Ma Peeves gave her. She ran out into the road. I'm going to go do this. And then that doesn't even work. And she gets splashed and spun around and defeated and feels like, I'm never going to get adopted. And then the next shot, which we don't have here in the animatic yet, but we'll see a walk-off towards the orphanarium that leads us into the title sequence.
Nice.
Should we play the whole thing?
Yeah, play the whole thing.
Yeah, just loop it a few times.
Yeah.
So that's some pretty good work. Like, we did this in a day and a half.
Yeah.
It's pretty good progress. I think it sets the timing pretty well.
Yeah, and we'll see once we have the dialogue locked in and the radio play. Um, a lot of this intro scene, just so for everybody watching, there's not a lot of dialogue. This is more about sound design and setting up the scene for Enid, for the viewers to really have some compassion
Yeah.
for her and understand sort of what she's going for. And so we want to root for her, from this point forward, that we have an attachment. We understand what she's gone through. We understand what what attention she's trying to get and what her goals are. And then it falls flat. And that'll bring us into Act Two, that we'll get to on our next session.
Nice. Nice. Well, cool. It would be exciting to see this building up, as we bring in models and we fine tune all of the materials and the animations. So cool.
Definitely.
Yeah, and then building blocks again. So as we previs this gives us the information that both John will need from building out the world and the models. It'll give information to Josh, our animator, to work on the performance and what shots we need and how long they are.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, we just continually upgrade different scenes, and not to get into too much technical stuff, but we'll have different levels within Unreal that we animate and build out just for that scene. So, right now it looks like we're building out the whole scene so we understand the assets that we need. But once we go into each individual shot, we'll only work with the models and lighting and animation that we'll need for each one of those individual shots, so that it's not necessarily one whole performance that we're just moving camera around and cutting. We're actually moving objects around and assets, changing time on animation per shot so that it works from a storytelling standpoint and not, so much from a continuity standpoint.
Yeah. So this wide shot when we're looking down at her, are we gonna? I guess we're gonna composite it later, right? The level from inside the orphanarium is gonna be a separate level, right?
Yes.
I'd say.
Yeah, it'll be a separate level that has a green screen.
Yeah.
In front of the window, or behind the window rather.
Behind the window, yeah. So I think what I want to do on that overhead 3/4 shot POV of Preston and Franklin is we'll take this image, we'll comp it into the background of the window as and we have both Preston and Franklin right and left of screen silhouetted, and then we'll do a rack focus from the street of Enid running, and camera pulls back a little bit and rack focuses towards the foreground of Preston and Franklin as they turn to each other and say, I think she's going to get run over again, or she might get run over again, whatever the dialogue is that we have there. And so that gives us a viewer, again, like a standpoint from the viewer, that we have somebody within the story helping follow us along with the story, right?
I see that. So we're gonna start with the focus on Edith, wait in the distance, and the foreground is gonna be out of focus, and then we bring the foreground into focus with Preston, and that's cool.
Right, because once we cut to, and I'm jumping ahead for some of those that don't know the story here yet, but once we jump inside the orphanarium after the title sequence, the very first characters that we're going to see are Preston and Franklin.
Yeah.
And we want to introduce them before we get to them, so we have an understanding of there are characters inside the orphanarium observing Enid, having a bit of dialogue as a voiceover, watching her. And so we have a connection to those characters a little bit, or we've at least introduced them, so that when we cut into the orphanarium to the variety show skit for Act 2, we already know who those characters are a little bit, and we've been introduced to them as an audience.
Nice. Well, cool. Shall we review a little bit what we're doing on the animation side?
Yeah, Josh is available. We can share his screen and look at maybe the expression pack or some of the dialogue, phonetics, whatever we can share there would be fun to, one thing that we want to do here, just for everybody following along, is while John and I are working on the scene and start animating some of this dialogue, so that we already have it kind of locked in with keyframes, so that once John and I block out the scenes, we can throw it to Josh, and then Josh knows what's going to be on camera or not, or what the movement is of the puppet. But we already have some of the facial expressions, already R&D'd, research and design, to start figuring out what that looks like.
Yeah, this is cool. These are the basic phonemes for what are they called?
Phonetics.
Phonetics.
Yeah, so what we do traditionally, and I come from more of a stop motion background, so I'll explain it that way first, but how it translates to 3D is that in stop motion, we create a mouth pack. And what a mouth pack means is we create all the syllables and consonants of certain letters, like a V or a P or an A or an O, and we find out what that design language looks like and figure out sort of the mouth shapes. And so in stop motion, we don't have any in-betweens. And what I mean there is that in stop motion, typically you have 12, 20 certain expressions that you just jump to one from the other. But what I really like working with in 3D and in Maya and within animation here is that there's in-betweens, which means the mouth has to stretch and move, and you have those in-between frames, right? So you're not just popping from one to the other. So
yeah, we're not
Josh
using
has done a great job here.
We're not using sticks
Sticker mouse.
Yeah, sticker mouse or paper clips. Right?
Yeah, like exactly. That. I mean, that's what we did on Robot Chicken, and that was my initial intro to animation back in I don't know when it was. You're around 2000, so it's been about 25 years. But yeah, doing sticker mouth or post-it mouse, those types of things in stop motion are a little bit easier and a little bit funnier. There's a certain kitsch factor to that style of animation, obviously. But within 3D, we have those in between. So we actually see the mouth move and stretch. And so we're just trying to work on the design language of what those phonetics are, what the expressions are, whether it be happy, sad, smiling, whatnot. It's just a fun exploration into R&D to see the puppets come to life.
Cool. Uh-oh. I really like the way that the lips move now.
Yeah, and I think one thing too, what's a challenge here for the Plague Puppets compared to some other animated shows or films that you've seen is that these puppets are tactile objects that are sewn, handmade. They're made out of velvet, corduroy, sequins. We
Yeah.
have so many different pelts and costumes and designs that really represent Julie's original artwork of creating the puppets in real life. That have been adopted out to thousands of people out there. And the way that we want to bring these puppets to life in the 3D world is to still respect and understand the sensibilities of how those puppets would move. So we're trying to do a little bit more of a sock puppet opening and closing, and a little bit more rudimentary, I would say, animation, as opposed to an over exaggerated, stretchy, cartoony version. We want this to feel real. And I think that a lot of projects that are great films and TV shows working in 3D, they have the ability to stretch and move and be a little bit more cartoony and extend some of the extremities or proportions and things like that. We are trying to dial it back a little bit to be a little bit more on point with the real world and how Julie's puppets actually, would talk or interact from a tactile point of view.
Yeah, yeah. I kind of
So,
I like that concept. Where you're trying to respect the fact that these are made with fabrics, and it's not rubber. It's not that stretchable.
right, exactly.
And yeah, super cool.
Yeah, and so a few of the challenges and things that we're working on here is, as the mouth opens and closes, we have the stitches, which are obviously, an iconic, part of the puppet design and structure, but also the eyes. So we have these button eyes, and you'll see a lot more down the road once we get into animation about what we can do with the pupils and the eye threads and things like that. But what we're able to do is give some physics to the eye movement of the button eyes and how they react to the pelt moving and the stitches moving. And I think, Josh has done a great job here with making it minimal and not so, yeah. So
Yeah.
this is how crazy we could go with something, right?
Um, so, one of the things that maybe we should touch a little bit is how the puppets express, right, that the hat is part of the expression, right? Because there is only, we're not gonna deform the eyes, but we're gonna use the pupils, but really the hat is the one that act as the right, as the
Yeah.
eyebrows.
Yeah, the hat. Yeah, the hat's going to do a lot of heavy lifting. So, going back to, again, my stop motion experience, we typically have eyelids, pupils, eyebrows. Typically I'm working, even if I'm doing if it's not a human, I'm doing a character like a seal or a whale or a penguin or something like that. And each one of those characters, once you get out of the human uh, uh, character design and you go into animals, cats, dogs, puppets, whatever, we need to find out what assets that we have that we can use to emote those expressions. So whether they're happy and excited or they're sad, the hat for us in Plague Puppets here is going to do a lot of the heavy lifting for the emotion, and the hat in itself acts as eyelids and eyebrows, and then just the fun design of having a hat on your head, but it acts as ears like a dog or a cat, right?
Yeah.
So
that's a good expression that you got there, Josh. That's a good one.
yeah, there's a lot of fun stuff like
Sorry
this.
to interrupt,
Yeah,
Jed. Sorry.
that's
Sorry, I didn't
super
mean to
cute.
interrupt.
No, no, not at all. No, that's super cute. I mean, I think this is what we're exploring, and we're trying to design, you know, what is the language of the assets that can emote certain expressions, and some are case by case depending on the dialogue or what's happening at the moment. So we'll certainly embellish this, but what we're doing here is creating a design bible
Mm-hmm.
that gives us like a character lineup of expressions. And
Yeah.
that's something that you do in all animation, whether it be 2D, stop motion, 3D. Again, agnostic to the format, from my standpoint, it's more about what tools do we have in our tool belt to utilize to emote these expressions, and what triggers do we have, what rig do we have in the hat, the rig in the eyes, and all those things we're investigating right now to find out what is our design language moving forward.
One of
So
the
very
things.
rudimentary.
Yeah, yeah. So one of the things that I wanted to that I was thinking earlier when we were animating this is that we may need to have at least a few variations, right? So that not all the puppets move the lips, or some of the things the same way. Maybe we can create a couple of variations that are unique to specific puppets, right? Which it's a
Absolutely.
little bit more
Yeah.
work, but
And I think,
some of it may be necessary.
yeah, and adding on to that, we've discussed, currently throughout the NFTs and the puppet generator and what we've, curated at this point is all based on the same size and scale of model. And as we develop some unique characters that you'll see in the pilot going forward. So for those of you watching that have NFTs and you have some of the scenes, you've adopted some puppets. Um, at this point, they're all sort of based on similar models, right? But in this pilot, what we're able to do is generate puppets that are taller, wider, skinnier, you know, whatever it may be, and then we can adjust some of the assets from the hat to whether it be the outfits and the accessories and things like that, but be able to create unique versions of a certain puppet. So whether it may be Jethro who flies through, or it's the conjoined twins, some of these characters that you guys will see moving forward as we get into the skit a little bit more. We can definitely curate those to have certain design sensibilities where it's not all cookie cutter, and we want to make sure that each puppet is unique, has their own personality, even if it's a background character. We've talking about bringing in the MPPs and bringing in some of existing puppets that are out there, so you can have background puppets in here and we can give them some personality that's a little bit different, so that it doesn't feel like we're always watching the same character.
Right. Well, really cool. All right. I think that's what we have for today, right? You have anything else, Jed, that you want to touch on, or?
No, I think this is good. I mean, we're just, for everybody watching along or looking at the video afterwards, we're in the very rudimentary sketch stage here of blocking out the scene, understanding what shots we have, what the timing is,
Mm-hmm.
and that'll inform, just from a production standpoint, the way that I work is to visualize everything, get it down on paper, do a previs. That informs all of our artists, whether we're building models, doing animation, lighting, animation, all that stuff. We have a blueprint and a roadmap moving forward where we've already previs this. And with animation, it's different than live action. I've worked in live action a lot, and you show up on set and you can shoot a lot of different shots, and you can have multiple cameras, you can do all this stuff. In animation, you really want to have that that radio play, which is the VO and the dialogue, and what Julie's recording with Colby. Colby, our sound engineer and designer of the podcast, and put together that radio play, bring that into the animatic, and work, in this previs format to see what shots do we need, how long are they, what are the elements and assets we need.
Yeah.
And we're just going to keep plugging along going forward and filling in the blanks as we go.
Yeah, well, personally, I'm super excited. I feel really lucky to be able to work on a creative project like this. This is yeah, it's I truly believe in what we're doing here. It's very rewarding, and I hope well, I know that, and I hope it's rewarding for you guys too, and it's um uh, it's an amazing process.
Yeah, and it's great for everybody to follow along and kind of see what we're doing and how we do it. And a little bit of a tutorial here on how to produce something in animation and the multiple steps that we have
Mm-hmm.
to take. And it's a long process. And if you're efficient with it and you hone in on what you need to pay attention to and not spend calories and time on other things, you can get straight to the point. And yeah, it's going to be just a great story unfolding from not only the script and Julie's vision, and then to the technical side of what we're doing in Unreal and with effects and a lot of that stuff that I think you guys can speak to a little bit more when we get to it, which will probably be a couple of weeks before we get to the VFX and post production stuff. But this is just the launching pad here for us to diagnose everything and figure out the scenes and chip away at it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I like the extra freedom that that we have right now as opposed to the NFTs, right, where we had certain guidelines that we had to follow, but still, we are gonna be able to bring a lot of this work back to the NFTs. So imagine that maybe we will have the some of the NFTs being able to take part in these scenes, as either as main characters or as side characters. So we will be able to integrate some of the scene into our NFT production process and have them available for the NFT holders, which I think is going to be super cool.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's something that's really advantageous to us right now, just as a community, as we build out the Plague Puppets world. And for those that are on board, whether it be through NFTs or through the YouTube channel, what we'll be able to do here is introduce other point of views or other characters that are part of the scene. And build out a little bit more of the side stories that you may not be seeing as much. So imagine Preston and Franklin right now in the window. We only have, one or two shots of Preston and Franklin looking at Enid run out on the road. But what conversation were they having before that? What conversation are they having after that?
Yeah.
Right? So we could, in a sense, do this whole scene again just from their point of view, and have more dialogue and have a little fork in the road where choose your own adventure. We can see point of views from other characters observing this scene, or other other side steps that aren't in this opening sequence. And those are where we can really build out the world and the environment and the extra characters and kind of what their part is in this whole strategy.
Cool. Super excited. Well, thank you guys, and thank you everyone watching. Thank you, Simskin. We'll Well, we'll see you. I guess we're gonna try to do these every maybe 2 or 3 times a week. Catch up on the work that we've done. Um, yeah, and hopefully these are engaging and interesting. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next week. Have a good weekend.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.
Oh.